Okay, I think I'm live. This is going to be fun. I'm going to hang out here for just a second and let some people start to come on. I'm also hoping that my neighbor's lawn person who just decided to show up right outside my window and start leaf blowing is able to get his job done pretty darn quickly. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be heading over to the Choralosophers comment thread where a bunch of you have started leaving your comments. So I'm going to have multiple tabs up here. I think I'm probably going to be starting today with conversations that are related to, as I mentioned, picking up where we left off the last time I did a live stream, which was probably 2 summers ago, I want to say. As I mentioned this morning, for anyone who caught my little test, I haven't done these in a while, partly because I'm not a live streamer. Typically, my shows are pre-recorded. Fun fact, I don't edit shows unless, typically, the guest asks me to. Attention performing arts directors. Are you looking for a platform that understands your unique needs? Look no further than Ludus.com. Built from the ground up for the performing arts by people from the arts, Ludus is the perfect solution for your organization. With Ludus, you can drive revenue with ticket sales, merchandise, and fundraising, all while saving time, money, and resources. And the best part? It's 100% free to your program. Sign up for Ludus today and take your performing arts program to the next level. Choralosophy listeners can go to ludus.com/choralosophy for an upgrade for free to their marketing suite. Patreon page is what really, literally keeps this light on that is shining in front of me to make sure that I can continue to do the show forever. So head on over there. There are, of course, various levels that you can join. And at the producer or above level, we have Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Jonah Clixbull, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, Carlos, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kikachik. Head to patreon.com/choralosophy and join the crowd. One of the things that I find to be interesting is that when we talked in our live stream a couple years ago, one of the things that came up in that conversation was this idea of course, the things that we hear about all the time, like, what if they paid us more? Does it feel like our jobs are getting harder and harder every year? You know, those are kind of the, I don't want to discount anybody's comments, but like those are the kind of cliche comments, right? These are the things every time we talk about teacher burnout, these things come up. And so I'm going to put those in the category of like, yeah, obviously. Right. So obviously our jobs would be, we would have better attitudes about our jobs if we all got 25% pay raises. Yes, of course. Yes, we would have better attitudes about our jobs if tomorrow our principal sent an email over the summer and said, next year, none of you will have to do any before and after school meetings. Everything's going to be contained within the school day next year. Congratulations on your extra free time, right? So these are the things that would be the obvious, but I don't actually think that those are the source of why a lot of us feel like we're burnt out. So I'm going to start by, I guess, giving some personal anecdotes about why sometimes I feel burnt out. For me, I don't, first of all, like I'm 20 years in, I just finished my 20th year. I love teaching. I'm not going anywhere. Now, during the pandemic, of course, I did. I was looking for other jobs. I even applied for other jobs, non-teaching music related jobs. And, it got really bad. And so I think about things like, oh, hey there, Brian and Leon, joining in the Zoom meeting, which is awesome. I do have Patreon members are jumping in over on Patreon. I put the link to the Zoom meeting that I'm in. And feel free, if you are in the Zoom meeting, to leave comments and questions, and I'll get to those as soon as I can. So the reason I'm bringing up this story about myself and the pandemic is I I may or may not have covered this on a show in the past. I can't remember. It's been, 4.5 years almost now. Can't ever remember what all I've talked about. But how is it that somebody who has never once felt like teaching was not for them, and has loved every minute, has been so fortunate to be in a supportive administration situation almost my entire career, and I say almost. I've been lucky in so many ways to be able to teach in a place that I just have really loved. How is it that somebody like me can get into the pandemic and suddenly be applying for other jobs, right? And of course, there are so many obvious things there too. Like, did the job become less fun during the pandemic? Yes, of course. Did the job become more stressful because all of a sudden we're having to reinvent what it is that we do every day? And for old people like me, that's hard, to have to reestablish practices. But again, I'm going to say that I don't think that was quite it. I don't think that's why I was applying for other jobs during, I guess we could say, 2021. Which was kind of when I was at the deepest depths of my teaching-related depression at that time. I think it was related to a concept called moral injury. And I did bring this up on the last live stream. It didn't get a lot of, I guess, reaction because I think it's not a super common concept. That term isn't super well known. And so I'm actually going to read a little bit about moral injury from an article. This was written back in 2018, and it wasn't about teachers. It was about physicians. And I just am going to read a little bit of it and let you start to try to imagine in your own mind as I read parallels between what this article is talking about and what teachers have experienced in the last 3 years. So take out, every time I say doctor or physician in your brain, take out take that out and put in teacher. And every time I say patient, take that out and put in kids. And I think you'll kind of get an idea of why I think this is a psychological concept that we should be talking about more when we talk about teacher burnout. So here we go. From the article, this is called Physicians Aren't Burning Out. They're Suffering from Moral Injury. Physicians on the front lines of healthcare today are sometimes described as going to battle. It's an apt metaphor. Physicians, like combat soldiers, often face a profound and unrecognized threat to their well-being: moral injury. Moral injury is frequently mischaracterized. In combat veterans, it is diagnosed as post-traumatic stress. Among physicians, it's portrayed as burnout. But without understanding the critical difference between burnout and moral injury, the wounds will never heal, and the physicians and patients alike will continue to suffer the consequences. Burnout is a constellation of symptoms that includes exhaustion, cynicism, and decreased productivity. More than half of physicians, or teachers, report at least one of these. But the concept of burnout resonates poorly with physicians. It suggests a failure of resourcefulness and resilience, traits that most physicians have finally honed during decades of intense training and demanding work. Even at the Mayo Clinic, which has been tracking, investigating, and addressing burnout for more than a decade, 1/3 of physicians reported symptoms. We believe that burnout is itself a symptom of something larger: our broken healthcare system. Are you tracking these parallels? I think they're pretty obvious at this point. The increasingly complex web of providers, highly conflicted allegiances to patients, to self, and to employers, and its attendant moral injury may be driving the healthcare ecosystem. Now here, for those of you who are wondering what exactly is moral injury, here's the definition used in the article. The term moral injury was first used to describe soldiers' responses to their actions in war. It represents perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. Journalist Diane Silver describes it as a deep soul wound that pierces a person's identity, sense of morality, and relationship to society. So I'm going to leave the article now. I think I've set the stage for this conversation. I'm trying to make the case, I guess you could say, that this wave of teacher burnout over the last 2 or 3 years could be also being misdiagnosed as a wave of moral injury. So, how would that manifest itself for teachers? As teachers, we oftentimes are at our happiest, and I know that this is true about me when I was pre-pandemic. We are oftentimes at our happiest when we are, I guess you could say, feeling like we're effective and feeling like our actions and our decisions that we are making a difference and making kids' lives better. We're making them smarter. They are having, I guess you could say, like outcomes that signal to us that our job in the school and in the classroom matters and is worth their while. Like our presence there at the school makes those kids feel like, and they can also show that our presence is making a difference. Now, for me, again, this is just my personal anecdote. During the pandemic, I feel like I lost that. I lost any sense that me showing up every day to do a job made any difference in anybody's life at all. Or, let me rephrase that, made any difference in the majority of kids' lives. Because, of course, as we all remember from that time period, you might have a roster of 50 or 60 kids and 20 of them show up to the Zoom meeting and there's not going to be any consequences if they don't come. Right? So those types of things, we get put in a position where I have to pretend that I am doing an important thing when I log into the Zoom meeting to teach that class. I'm going to pretend to do an important thing that deep down I know isn't really impacting kids in the way that it's supposed to, but I know that because I'm the leader, I have to pretend like it does. That's moral injury, because I had to pretend. And so oftentimes I would come to school with this intense sense of pain, or if I was teaching from right here at this desk in this podcast studio like I had to do, I would feel this intense sense of pain that came from the idea that I wasn't making a difference in the way that I know that I should. And is that fair to put that on me? Were those my policies? No. Did I create the virus and make a pandemic? No. I didn't. So these things, it's not fair, but these are the things that we do to ourselves anyway. So that's just food for thought. When I post this recording, I will I'll put the link to that article if you want to read further into the concept. There's lots of great links in there too into like the psychological aspect of what's going on with moral injury. So that's food for thought. Feel free to drop any comments about that concept. Have you ever felt moral injury when you were teaching, as in you were asked to implement a policy, maybe say a grading policy you felt was harmful to kids? Have you ever been asked to create or take away a program that you felt was, so let's say you've got a program that you in your school that you really thought was beneficial to kids, and an administrator asked you to take it away, and so then you've got to be the bad guy, right? So that puts you in that position of moral injury where you're the one directly harming the kid. And again, you can see those parallels to physicians. You can see those parallels to where the term came from, which is in soldiers. A soldier's given an order to kill somebody. Is it their choice? They did sign up for the job. So in a sense, a philosopher, one of the annoying kind of philosophers, could say, well, you did sign up for that job. So that when you followed that order, you also are guilty. And then there's that conflict of saying, yeah, but like I also signed up for all these other things, that aspects of being a soldier or being a physician that I feel like are really good. And it was a tough choice. It was a complicated choice. And here I am having to deliver this thing that is harmful. And then how do I deal with that moral injury afterwards? And the reason I think this is also happening for teachers is because I listen to so many conversations or testimonials from teachers who have either quit or are thinking of quitting. And ultimately, it's somewhere in the story, I end up hearing something like that. Now, it always gets called burnout, but I'm just suggesting here that maybe that's another thing that's going on. So that just think I think that's an interesting concept. I enjoy reading about that and thinking about that. And also, just because of my personality, I also enjoy trying to find out what might be going on underneath a phenomenon in the zeitgeist, of course, in our American context, especially. These conversations are happening all the time. People are continuing even after the pandemic is officially over, according to the WHO and the CDC, and the emergency is passed. We still have these kind of bubbled up problems that happened, and I guess that were brought to the surface and maybe made more obvious within education systems that are leading to this. I know that in one comment here, I'm going to jump into the Facebook page. Oh, sorry. Okay, I have too many tabs here. All right. So from Elizabeth on my Facebook post yesterday, announcing that the live stream was coming, said that she just finished year 12, and every end of the year she continues to be more and more tired, taking on more and more throughout the year. So I'm kind of respond to that, but also in the context of what I was just talking about. So how could that be also an example of moral injury? And of course, if Elizabeth was sitting right here, I might ask, do you feel like that more and more that you're doing is all necessary? In other words, are the administrators asking you to do more and more because the kids genuinely need more and more, and all of those things that you're being asked to do are actually helpful to all the kids? Or, my suspicion is that we're being asked to do more and more stuff that doesn't make any sense, that isn't grounded in any type of outcomes-based evidence. And in a sense, we know deep down when we're asked to fill our time with all that stuff that doesn't help kids directly, that we're experiencing moral injury on some level, because we know that our time could be better spent forming a relationship with a kid. Heck, I know it's crazy for a music educator, but teaching them music. Like, we could be doing that. We could be mentoring them. We could be thinking on our feet to solve the problems that are in front of us. But in a lot of cases in schools, we're being handed so many new tasks and new initiatives and new, heck, at my school, scripts that we have to follow, like literal scripts of words that we have to say to kids that aren't our words. Like, if you want a barrier for authenticity, I'll hand a teacher a script, right? And kids can see right through that kind of stuff. These are all examples in my mind of moral injury. And when we are morally injured, we are more likely to be fatigued. We're more likely to have that sense of I don't know if I can do this anymore. This just gets harder and harder every year, because I firmly believe that teaching, even when it's, how do I say this? Teaching, even if it were perfect, right? Like, we could name like every policy that we wish would be in place to make our jobs easier. We get that 25% raise. We get those, before and after school meetings are gone. Those are the school's hiring clerical assistants for everybody, so that all we have to do is teach, right? Let's say all those things happen. I would argue that teaching still would be a hard job. Because it should be a hard job, actually. It should be a difficult job in the sense that getting humans to know stuff is hard. Like, I've got this knowledge in my brain, and I'm going to make it be in your brain. Like, that's hard. All by itself, that's hard, without all this extra stuff. So that's, I think, an interesting concept. I'm going to jump back into this comment thread here. So from Stephanie Rowland, I had mentioned the possibility of talking about reinventing the school program, first days of school, and teaching literacy, which I'm going to get to teaching literacy here in a little bit. But the reinventing your program thing and the first days of school thing are also kind of related, I think, to what we've been talking about so far. So part of the way that a teacher makes their job easier is by efficiently and with intention. Efficiently and with intention, they have created the first several days of their school year in a way that they pretty close to know what's going to happen every day, so that there isn't any sense of disorganization from the students. There isn't any sense of, like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Or well, within the first 3 or 4 days, I'm the student, right? And I've already figured out what I can get away with in this class. Like I've already figured out a way to weasel my way to that easy A, and I've already figured out what that low bar is within that first week. So a master teacher, an impact teacher, as I've seen it called before, are welcome, Stephanie. An impact teacher is somebody who doesn't let those things happen because they've got it so worked out. So I can give some examples. When we're talking about the first day of school, first week of school, there are some critical aspects there that I think just have to be present. And in my early years of teaching, these things were a lot harder for me. But number one, if we're going to teach a music class, there's got to be music happening on the first day of school. I know that I've seen different opinions. I've seen different opinions about this. Brian says, this is a great session. I'm sorry that I have to leave. I'll check out when you replay it. Yeah, of course, Brian. Feel free to, people can, from the Patreon link, can drop in, drop out, listen as they want, drop comments as they want. This is,
right,
no one's taking roll. But yeah, thanks, Brian. Okay, so back to this first days of school thing. The music's got to happen. I've seen different opinions about this. Maybe team building is the better thing for the first day of school. Maybe the fun games. Maybe please, just reading from the syllabus for the whole hour. Please don't do that. But I've seen lots of different approaches. Now, my belief is that the music is the most important thing on the first day of school, because I'm putting myself in the brain of young teenagers, in my case, young teenagers that are signing up for a class. Why did they sign up for the class? Ultimately, at some level, I really believe that kids sign up for a music class because they want to do music. I know that seems like sarcastic and obvious, but I don't think it is. I think even the kid who shows up to your class acting like they're too cool to do music, they still, in most school settings, had multiple options that they could have clicked that box to get that fine arts credit, and they chose a singing class. I think that we grow up as humans, and especially in our culture, because this is definitely not true in every culture, but in our culture, there is a lot of fear of our own voice that happens. And I think sometimes when kids sign up to take a choir class, there is an inner voice that wants so desperately to come out, but it's afraid. And so when they show up on that first day of school, they act like they don't really want to sing. But I think they do. Or else they would have signed up for art, or else they would have signed up for music appreciation in my school. They would have signed up for a variety of other things, but they clicked that choir box, or whatever you call it at your school, vocal music 1, or whatever it is that you call it. And so I think that matters. I think that signal matters. And so on the first day of school, what I try to think about is who that kid is, not specifically. I'm not trying to hunt you down and figure out if you're the kid who's afraid of his own voice or hers or whatever. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think on behalf of that kid. How do I figure out a way to get this group, whether they're beginners or whether they are my advanced kids, we need to sound good on the first day of school. And whatever that means to them, right? So obviously I will know that my definition of what good sounds like is not going to be the same as what a 14-year-old who's never taken choir before is, right? So I'm not thinking about we need to be perfectly in tune on the first day of school. Or I'm not thinking about things like we need to get our O vowel on lock on the first day of school, right? These are nerdy choir teacher things that we think about, but they don't think about that until we've taught them to think about that. And that's a process, right? So if I'm taking my brain and my context out, uninstall from my head, and I'm trying to put a 14-year-old's brain in there, and then I ask myself, we need to sound good on the first day of school. How do we do that? So in my experience, things like, can I get them to make a loud noise, a loud singing sound on the first day of school? Why does that matter? Well, it breaks a lot of nervous tension, number one. When we can get the group to make loud noises on the first day of school, even if my choir teacher brain is saying, oh my God, That sounded pushed. That sounded strained. Did you see the blood veins popping out of that one boy's neck? Right? All these things, honestly, guys, on the first day of school, I don't care. I want them to make a loud sound. In most cases, I want them to make loud sounds in harmony, even if it's not very well tuned harmony. And all on the first day of school. And in my program, because of my literacy-based kind of approach to things, I want them to sound good while sight reading on the first day of school. Because once we get over those humps where they start to leave the first few days of class excited about their own voice, so many other things fall into place. Things like buy-in from the students. They start to believe that they can be good once they've experienced that after the first few days of school. You can start to make comments like, did you hear that? Did you hear all that echo in the room or that resonance in the room or did you hear the vibration? Did you feel that? And just imagine what we could do after a month. We're only 2 or 3 days into the school year, right? So these things really, really matter. I think there are a lot. Yes, of course, do we want the kids to come into the class at the beginning of the year and feel safe and feel emotionally cared for and, all of those things? I would say yes. However, I don't believe that those are the types of things that you can actually do in the first 2 or 3 days. Those things have to be earned, especially with teenagers. Like they have to be earned through interaction and authenticity over that time. And so the sound for me, making sound, is really, really important. And back to the nervous energy thing. I think this one's one that I think a lot of times we miss. Nervous energy and fear of singing snowballs. It gets worse over the course of a school year if you don't address it early. So for example, if let's say you go 2 weeks into the school year and you are, let's say you are going into the school year and we are allowing tiny little scared, shy, mousy noises on the first few weeks of school. And then the concert's starting to getting close, right? And maybe now we're thinking about, okay, all right, everybody, we've learned some of the songs. Now can we start making a little bit more sound? Now can we start to really connect to our bodies and make... Here's the problem with that. In their minds then, again, this is 14-year-old brain. In their minds, what they had been doing for the last 2 weeks, which is barely phonating, starts to feel okay to them because you, as the teacher, made it okay. In other words, you accepted it. And by telling them 2 weeks later that the thing we've been doing the last 2 weeks was not actually okay, then what I think sometimes happens is that then they internalize, well, I guess this just wasn't good enough the whole time. And that's a hard hump to overcome. So it's kind of like, for those of you who are kind of in a younger generation of teachers, you might not have come across Harry Wong's First Days of School, which is, I think, a book that every school of education should still be reading. It's pretty incredibly well researched, which is a rarity in education research, actually. But I think it's a great book. So if you've not read it, read it. And one of the things he talks about is how difficult it is to change expectations down the road. So really, really important concept. Okay, I've got a comment here within the Zoom meeting from Stephanie, who was, of course, the person on the Facebook page, hi Stephanie, that initiated this conversation. So Stephanie says, in a middle school setting, and this is great because Robert also wanted to hear about middle school stuff, in a middle school setting where sight reading the first day is impractical, I'm curious how you would approach that. Okay, so first of all, Stephanie, I'm sorry. I completely disagree with your premise. So first of all, I think we'd have to be careful, Stephanie, on how you're defining sight reading. So in my definition of sight reading, if I say, I want the kids to sound good reading music on the first day of school, what I mean is it could be anything. It could be 3 quarter notes that are written up on the board as part of a warm-up, right? So for example, if I'm working with middle school kids, and I've never taught middle school, but I've worked with a lot of middle school kids in a variety of contexts and clinics and a variety of things. And my daughter is a middle school kid going into high school, and I've been working with her this summer over on some of her sight reading stuff. So, for example, and I know this will be kind of not the way a lot of us think of sight reading. I firmly believe that reading hand signs off of a human is sight reading. Okay, so if your kids are completely new to the concept of reading music, getting them to be able to read do, re, mi, but they don't know that pattern's coming. So you figure out a way in your warm-up to they don't know that exact pattern's going to happen, but you figure out a way to get them to sing that thing that they've never heard before while singing strong and confident and, without the kind of fear that happens in those first few days. Then I think you could go out of that first day of school thinking, my kids read music on the first day of school. Now, if, so you say you already do that. That's great. Hadn't thought about it as sight reading. So yes, and this is important because if we are thinking about music reading, and I think this is actually going to be a perfect transition into the talking about literacy part, which lots of people asked for us to talk about that too. So it is reading. At a neurological level, the same things are going on in a kid's brain, whether they're reading it on hands or whether they're reading it on paper. Now think about sign language for a person who speaks and communicates with sign language. Aren't they reading each other's hands? It's different symbols. They're symbols that are created with body parts rather than with pen and paper and with ink, but they are still symbols. And what has to happen is the eyes have to interpret those symbols with solfege hand signs, and they have to take that interpretation and turn it into a sound, which is exactly what our brain does when we see the letter TH, and we immediately, if we're good fluent readers, we immediately hear th, right? Because we've learned to translate those symbols into a sound. And so Stephanie, this is a really good question because we need to be thinking about all of these things as part of the literacy process. And I get this comment a lot where I start to think that maybe we think of sight reading as simply picking up a piece of music with no auditory input and singing it, which of course that's an end result of somebody who's been trained to sight read, but it isn't all of what sight reading is. And I think that's really, really important. So that's a great question. So let's go deeper into that a little bit. So if we think about, I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent here because I had several great conversations last week during our summer choral institute that Contorai does over a week in the summer. Just happened last week, and we have middle school kids there, and we have high school kids, and then we have young adults. It's kind of like grade 6 all the way up to adults, and we all collaborate together, and we learn music together, and then we put on this big performance at the end of the week. And the young kids come in knowing no music ahead of time. So they see it all from scratch on Monday, and then we perform at the end of the week on Sunday. And that includes the middle school kids. And so unlike the typical honor choir experience where kids come in knowing the music already, or at least have been exposed to it, right? And the clinician comes in and they give their interpretation, and we're going to breathe here, and we're going to crescendo here. And ultimately they're only learning part of the music in that scenario. But in our camp, they learn it. The clinician starts from scratch with them. And we do it very much that way on purpose because we want them to start to learn that music actually can be absorbed in multiple ways, and our kids get to experience different clinicians every time, right? And their thought process of how to learn it and how to teach it. So part of that camp led to some really good conversations with Andrew Crane, who was our clinician and maybe Andrew will hear this or see this, and I'm sure that he will not mind that I'm sharing some of this conversation. But we had a lot of conversations about the way I've been trying to explain music literacy to the audience over the last couple of years. And one of the things that I know gets me in trouble sometimes is that I am essentially making the argument that we've all been doing it wrong. We've been taught to do it wrong. We've been taught to think about it wrong. And this has been an issue across the whole profession going back 100 years. And one of the reasons that I'm passionate about this, and I believe so very strongly that it's true, is that the way that we've learned to read music in the past has privileged the people who are already showing signs of high musical aptitude when they're young. So if for example, if I'm going to play notes along for kids that are on the piano while they read along, the kids who are going to not be left behind in that setting are going to be the ones who played piano, play in band or orchestra, and or for some other reason have a lot of experience hearing and responding to music quickly. Because at a neurological and a linguistic level, those are the kids who already came in with all the phonemic information is required to understand the musical language. So kids that have been exposed to larger amount of musical sound and having created it with their own body are like the kids who come into kindergarten with lots of parents reading to it and with them before they get to kindergarten. So that creates a privilege within that system for those kids who have prior exposure. Are they going to be the ones who learn to read? So when I talk about teaching literacy, what I'm really talking about is talking about teaching to the kid who has none, right? Teaching to the kid who has never looked at a piece of music and tried to figure out what it sounds like and create that music from their own brain in the same way that we learn to read English. Right. Now, for example, I've got my own kid was a struggling reader in elementary school, and she's not quite diagnosable as dyslexic, but she's got a lot of those same symptoms of dyslexia. And of course, we all know we've learned a lot as educators over the last several years about dyslexia, and we've started to learn things like, 1 in 5 or so people are dyslexic, but dyslexia is a continuum. It's not like a hard and fast category. There are wide ranges of where in the dyslexia spectrum someone falls, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with autistic type situations. Right? There's this big smooth brain versus bumpy brain spectrum. Everybody falls somewhere in there. Now, my daughter was more on the dyslexic side of that spectrum. So learning to read in school, based on the way that she was being taught, was a disaster for her. And now, of course, science of reading is like this big thing that's going on in education right now and causing a lot of stir, a lot of arguments, a lot of anger towards the idea that, the way we were teaching reading for the last 30 or 40 years was wrong. And how do we know? Well, we know now because we can see people's brains. We can see people's brains when people are learning to read. And so my contention, my argument is that, and the reason I know I've gone on a tangent here, Stephanie, and to everybody's listening, but the reason I'm going into this here is because if I'm going to say, here's why it's so important that we are reading on the first day of school. And the reason for that is that it takes a long time for the kids who have never learned to do this before. It takes a lot of time to develop the library of sound files in their brains that it takes to be a fluent reader. Now, I believe that a goal of a music education system within a school district, for example, anytime you've got kids for an extended period of time, whether it be K through 12 or whatever, the goal should be to send them out of their various programs literate in that subject matter. And it doesn't matter if it's music or math or history or science or reading language itself. The goal should be literacy, proficient, fluent literacy. So what do I mean by that? Fluent means if I'm an English reader, it means that I can pick up fluently. I can pick up a book. I've got my iPad here, and I can just look at it and know what the words sound like in my head and what they mean. I can talk about them. I can read them out loud. I can read them silently in my head. Our goal should be that as well for music. Our goal should be that our kids can pick up a score by the time they've had enough training and practice to be able to do that. So on the first day of school, that even at the middle school level, and I know that this is possible because I was one of those privileged kids that was young and was being taught these things at age 5 because my mom was a music teacher. There isn't a such thing as you're too young to do these things. We have to dispel that myth because you can learn to start to hear intervals in your head at very young ages. And so what we can do at the middle school level is, let's say, okay, my kids are brand new and I only have 40-minute classes or whatever, and I only get to see them every other day, or all these other systemic challenges. Well, but we have to start somewhere, right? So it could just be that on the first day of school, I want my kids to be able to read do, re, mi, and ti. And I believe that in most cases, that's actually something you could achieve on the first day of school. Maybe in a couple different combination patterns. Maybe it's only on your hands. I think in my perfect world, it would be I'd do it on my hands first, and then I go over to some stuff on the board, and maybe I write, well, so here's this, and I wrote it, and then here's this, here's my ray, and then I write that, and then I might do hands and pointing, right? So that they can start to see that these things are happening simultaneously. And by the end of the school day, or by the end of that first day, we're able to look at them and say, yes, you can read music. Now, can they do what adults do? Well, no, but neither can kindergartners when they're learning sight words, right? We have to start somewhere. And I think part of this always comes back every time I get on this high horse. All of this comes back to, yeah, but isn't that so slow? And do we really want to spend the first years of their choir teaching experience and their choir experience doing all this kind of stuff? And I guess what I would say is, literacy is equity, so we owe it to them. Number two, I would say that as they go, they start to speed up so quickly that if you're trying to wrap your mind around how this would occupy some portion of your day, we're talking about maybe lessons designed for 4 or 5 minutes each day. And you'll be amazed at how quickly kids can learn music to the point where it actually becomes more fun, more entertaining, less stressful. All of these things start to happen when they have built that sound library in their heads. Okay, back to Stephanie. And then I'm going to jump into the Facebook page again here and see if I can find more comments. I've got literally 4 tabs open right now. Random sidebar, but what makes you choose to start with certain intervals? Especially when I taught K-12, we always started with so, me, and then law. I think that's a great question. There are lots of right answers to that question. I think the main thing for me is, are they learning to read it and not just mimic it? And of course, reading it could also be hands and all of that. But so part of that will be determined by the group of kids. Because again, I talked about the sound file library and what they come loaded with already in their heads. Some kids might be ready for some skips and intervallic relationships, but like Carol Krieger always talks about, the sound before sight idea, the sound differences between intervals, the larger the interval there is, might take a little bit longer for them to load it into their brain. So if you've got kids that kind of if they can easily, as part of a warm-up, if they can easily recreate those intervals, I would say go for it. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I think starting with so, me, and then law, for example, those are great. That's great. I don't think there's any certain magical syllables that you have to start with. My thought is just if the problem that a teacher is feeling is that it's just so little time on the first day of school, then I use the example of do, re, mi, and ti in different combinations, right? So that could be do to mi, but that could also be re to ti, or that could be do to re, or do, re, mi, ti, do, or something like that, right? So for me, that was just an example. I hope that answers that question. That was not intended to come across as like, you must teach do, re, mi, and ti on the first day of school, or your kids suck at choir. That's definitely not what I mean. So that's just one of the many ways that you could approach that. Okay, I'm going to jump now back into the Facebook comments and see if I can drum up some more conversation topics, because this is really, really good. All right. So here, let's we might come back to literacy if people have more comments or questions on that. But I'm going to bring up, this is Thea. I think I pronounced that correctly, I hope. Wanted to talk a little bit about, and this probably could go back to the teacher burnout side of things, maybe just a little bit, the idea of working as an assistant in a program, and then also what happens if a new head director comes in and you've already been the assistant. And so what I would suggest is, if anyone wants to find Thea's comment and jump into the Facebook thread and reply if you've ever been in a similar situation. I can't really address that very directly because I've never been in that situation. I have been an assistant high school choir director before for 3 years. I know what that aspects of it's like. But in my case, I came in to assist a person who had been there for 25 years. So there wasn't, I don't know, I had a good attitude about it, I guess, because I didn't really expect to be in charge when I came in, fresh out of grad school. So I think that part was easier for me. I don't really know how to deal with that other than, is it the job that you want? Do you want to be there? If so, my advice would be to just dive in with both feet, jump in with both feet and do the job and do the work that it takes to make that new person successful, because then the kids will be successful. All right. Let's go to Jenna. Has a comment here also. Strategies to build a program when you don't have a feeder school. And then in the comment, you can read the rest of her scenario. But I'll just take that first thought there, which is to build a program when you don't have a feeder school. Again, something else I have not experienced. I've never had been in that situation, with the exception of things like church groups, where I've been put in positions where I have to build a youth choir from scratch, or even the summer camp groups that I work with, where different kids come with different amounts of experience. Honor choirs are some of the similar types of concepts apply, where when you're trying to speak to them, you know that every kid is coming from a different background, and so they don't have all the same common language for how to understand what it is that you're even talking about. That's a huge challenge. And so if you're teaching in a program without a feeder, what I would suggest is spending part of what you're doing when you're establishing those literacy habits at the beginning of the school year, is you are establishing a set of common language at the beginning of the school year. Because not everybody in any choir program, whether there's a feeder or not every kid in that class is going to come in with the same aptitude, the same skill set, the same talent level, the same prior experience, etc. And so when there's no feeder at all, what they would also be lacking, I would think, is a common set of language to describe what it is that we're trying to do. And so I would be throwing in vocabulary. I would be putting stuff up on the wall that kind of defines and explains the things that you think are just super obvious. I've noticed since the pandemic, I have to do a lot more of this anyway at my school, because the kids that were in the junior high part of the program are the ones who are now in high school. And so they missed a lot, and I'm having to start from scratch, which I think ultimately when we're doing a feederless program, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're starting from scratch. We can't assume that everybody knows everything or that everybody knows anything in that sense. So that's going to be helpful as well. All right. So I've got and this is actually on the live stream itself. Oh, no, that's the old one. Hold on. Here it is. Okay, I'm going to go back in and refresh. See, this is the part that I will probably edit it out when I post it as an episode later. Okay, here we go. So now, I'm going to go to some of the questions that were dropped in the actual live stream as I was talking before. I came preloaded in this conversation with a bunch of comments already, and so maybe that was not the best way to do a live stream. I don't know. I don't do these very often. But here's from Michael DeVoe. So Michael commented this back when I was talking about moral injury. Michael says, how does one deal with moral injury? And I think that's a great question. And I'm going to type in here just in case Michael's not on anymore. Responding now. Refresh. This is the part that I probably edited out when I posted as a. Oh, let's mute that. Okay. So so how do you deal with moral injury? I would say this question falls outside of my expertise. I am not a counselor. I am not a psychologist. I can only just talk about, I guess, what I did and how I felt when I was feeling like I was morally injured as a teacher. It caused me to have to think very, very deeply about what it was that I was doing and why I was doing it, and whether or not I could put up with it anymore. I had to draw my own line in the sand. Now, for me, the policies in our area got to the point where I was able to start doing my job again, related to getting kids on campus, talking to them face to face, helping them, feeling like I could put my hand on their shoulder, even if we were socially distanced and I was just walking by briefly to pat them on the shoulder because I know they're having a really tough time, or whatever it was that I felt like was made me a good teacher before. I could do those things again before I had to give up. But I think a lot about whether or not, had that continued for another year or whatever, could I have put up with it? And I think the answer is no. I would have had to draw a line in the sand and say, I won't do these things anymore. These things are like, I am not going to be part of a system that's harming kids. And that would be difficult because then I'd have to get a new job, and then I would have to maybe sell my house and make less money and all those other things. But I think that line is going to be different. That line in the sand is going to be different for everybody. That's, I guess, the best way that I could respond to that one. Rebecca Adler says that I can remember what I talked about 2 summers ago. That's impressive. So, Rebecca, if you're still on, I'm going to reply to Rebecca as well. Okay. So this is funny because this is just maybe a peek behind what it's like to be me. But I have to remember all the things that happen on this show because that's my job. So what ends up happening, so I have 2 people that work for me, and they both go through their jobs or to dig through my entire catalog of 4.5 years of episodes and float ideas and clips and moments and different conversations that have happened. So I get reminded about these things all the time. So it's part of the Coralosophy, I guess, business model. The business side of the show is that I have people whose job it is to make sure there are conversations being generated at the very least, having you reminded as the audience about all the different types, the diversity of conversations that have happened on this platform, because it's 250 something hours of stuff. So do I remember every story I've ever told on here? No, but I have a pretty good catalog in my brain of all the things, all the topics that we've covered, because I also maintain the coralosophy.com website, which means that I'm always organizing and categorizing and making sure that navigating experience is better for the audience. So that's good. That's funny. And then I also get a comment here from Michael. Not about burnout per se, but feeling no hope for the future of the arts in public schools led to me leaving the classroom after a decade in Colorado. I'm assuming that's what they mean. 69% of school districts in Colorado operate on a 4-day school week, mostly due to the lack of funding. We have something called TABOR, which is killing ed funding. Jobs get cut all the time. Oh man, yeah. So I would also call that moral injury. After reading the article and kind of going through the framework we went through at the beginning of the episode, I wonder if you would agree. That sounds like, to me, a textbook example of a teacher who quit because they were feeling morally injured. What is the... why would I have no hope for the future of arts in public schools if I'm not being given orders from on high, so to speak, that make it impossible for me to exercise my ability as an artist to improve the lives of kids? So I'm being asked as a teacher to do things that I don't feel like has results and has beneficial results. And in a lot of ways, there's not much difference between that and causing harm. So that's a thought. Okay, and Rebecca says here, I was forced to give students a grade for choir when they did not participate in any way, shape, or form. It felt like nothing we did for the entire semester mattered. Yeah, yikes. Mm-hmm. And Jason says, hello from Massachusetts, joining to gain some perspective from outside of New England. Welcome back, Jason. Jason popped into the Zoom meeting as well from Patreon. Yeah, I definitely. So everybody, I will do this again, and I will do this better. I'm now seeing that I was looking at the wrong feed of comments, and so I missed your comments as they were happening in real time. But yeah, okay, you live and you learn. I think this will be good because then when we go back and post this as an episode, then everybody's comments will be. Well, we'll get there, everybody, or eventually. Okay, so then, yep, Michael's back and said he would agree that with that assessment about moral injury makes you feel very devalued. Yeah, absolutely. Am I really going to come to work every day and bust my butt for, you know, marginal 9 month a year pay, and then at the end of the day still feel like all that work wasn't making kids' lives better? Because ultimately, let's be honest, everybody. We know when we sign up as teachers, to be teachers, we know that we're not going to be wealthy from it. Like, we know that, and I don't think any of us expect to become wealthy teaching public school or college or whatever. We don't expect to be wealthy. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there. But what we do expect is we expect to, in exchange for working a job that doesn't pay as much as a lot of corporate jobs for 12 months of the year would, in exchange for that, we hope to have some sense of moral fulfillment from what it is that we're doing. And I would also caution us, we don't need to be treated like heroes either. We're not on the front lines of a battle. We're not curing cancer. That being said, we are doing a very, very important job, and we should be allowed to feel like we're doing a very important job that is recognized by students, but also, more importantly, recognized by our bosses, because our bosses are typically educators as well. They should know better. They should know that teachers need to feel this way, like, hey, I'm putting in all this effort, and this effort is going to go right towards the benefit of kids, because that's why I do this job. It's being a public servant. Right? That's why I think it's such a great analogy, back to the beginning of this talk where we were talking about physicians and soldiers. And I think a lot of those types of jobs, people-facing service-type jobs, that's why people get into them in the first place. We can't take that away from people. Yep, and then Robert says, hi, thanks for taking on my previous comment. Can you talk a little on classroom management and what policies, rewards, and consequences you have? Yes. Now, I will say that I'm not going to spend a lot of time, Robert, talking about classroom management in this episode, but I will put a link in the comments about to some resources that I've already created on classroom management, because here's the short little spiel that I will give on this one. Having a clear handbook and rubric and very, very objective expectations for what is expected in your class. And then the most important part, implementing it on the first day of school and then sticking with it all year long is the undergirding, so to speak, the undergirding of any good classroom management, is that the kids have to know you're serious. And it doesn't matter what your rules are. If the rules are fungible, then you're not going to have a classroom management system. And that has to be established. So the things that are important there, of course, within the first week of school are admin support. So if you're going to implement a system, make sure it fits with your school's policies and that your administrator would back you up for if and when that gets challenged by a parent or a kid. Because without that, like, as soon as the kids see you present, here's what we're going to do, and then they see that they can force you to back off of that, then everything's out the window at that point. And I have created some resources on the shows many years ago now, but those are resources that people continue to go back to and use, about creating resources, building your classroom, setting up expectations within the classroom. So I'll post a link on that later when I sign off. Now I understand why, like, the big time podcasters with live streams and stuff, why they have employees that run the comment threads and help keep track of it all. I understand that now. I'm not quite there yet in terms of live streaming. Okay. All right. So, yeah, there it is. It's called Physicians Aren't Experiencing Burnout, and it's from 2018. All right. So I'm going to try to tackle the last couple here. Okay. I think because of all the conversations that have happened up until now, all the different topics, which so far we've covered some concepts of teaching literacy just on a very surface level. And of course, I've published a ton, so I'm not going to go back and rehash like how to teach sight reading. There are tons and tons of resources on Chorealosophy already. So I would encourage you to go think about that. I've talked about moral injury as it relates to burnout. We've talked about first days of school importance, the importance of setting expectations, and we've talked about feeder programs and their relationship to the high school programs, et cetera, and vice versa. And then we have Cage here, who came in not too long ago and asked thoughts on how to be an excellent feeder school. So we've talked about how to teach in a program that doesn't have a feeder school, but how to be an excellent feeder. Now, this I have strong feelings about. And this one is really related to communication between the feeder and the whatever the next level is, whether it's high school or whatever. Are there open lines of communication between what is expected of kids when they're coming into a program? What are the things that that we would really like to align between our programs so that they aren't having to start some kind of new, completely different philosophical framework when they get to high school? As part of a public school system, I actually think that we kind of owe students some continuity. Other subject matters get it, right? Other subject matters meet together in alignment of curriculum, because in many cases state tests make them, like they have to. And I would suggest that in music we probably should be doing that. So I think so communication is number one. But I think when I'm thinking personally about what do I want from my feeders, I honestly just want numbers. I want large numbers of excited kids. I don't actually care all that much about what they learn because I'm confident in my ability to teach them once they get there. Like I can start kids from scratch. We've turned kids into all-staters who have never seen a piece of sheet music before. They weren't even in middle school choir. So I know we can do that. I just need people. So I think for me personally, this is not because it's the right answer. I just feel like for me personally, a middle school choir program is successful when it's reaching lots of kids with some type of a formative, exciting singing experience, so that when the high school choir teacher goes to try to recruit them, they have some frame of reference that says choir is cool. That's bare minimum. So at the bottom line, that's got to be happening. I think for any feeder school. All right, I think I at least touched on every issue that was dropped in here. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to sign off now. You will see if you missed any portion of this. This was kind of wide-ranging and fast-paced, so this will get posted as an episode probably next week. I'll go ahead and clean it up a little bit so I trim out all the boring parts. And of course, as always, it's really, really helpful when you go back through back catalogs of episodes. This is summer. Try to get caught up with some great conversations. I'm really, really proud of the cultivation of conversations that have happened on the show over the last year. It just continues to grow and be an exciting place for choral conversations. And I really appreciate everybody jumping on today and leaving their comments. And I think I will be better now at making live streams, and I'll probably do another one or two of these this summer. I don't know that I can promise that they'll happen during the school year, but it gets a little too busy for you and for me. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.